Stacy Ayres. In 1981, 14-year-old Stacy Ayres would join her father George and a few others for a horseback ride through Yosemite's National Park, located in California. This national park is known for many things, but most noticeably is its deep valleys and its stunning waterfalls. From what we know, this trip would take around 4 days to complete, but that didn't scare Stacy off. In fact, she was excited to see some of the landscapes that Yosemite had to offer. She even brought her own camera. The group took off along the High Sierra Loop Trail with 2 tour guides and arrived at the Tuolumne Meadows campground on Friday. Soon after everyone had settled in, Stacy decided to stretch her legs and head out on a walk up to a nearby lake, but not before asking her father to join her. He declined her offer as he was too tired, but warned Stacy about the dangers of the park. He told her to change out of her sandals and into a pair of hiking boots. Little did her father know this would be the last time he would ever see Stacy again. Stacy marched off into a nearby trail with her camera in hand, accompanied by Gerald, who was another one of the group's members. Gerald at the time was around 70 years old and couldn't keep up with 14-year-old Stacy, opting to take a break every once in a while in between stops to take some pictures. Eventually, Stacy was so excited to see the lake that she decided to move on ahead and told Gerald to catch up when he can. Now, assuming Stacy was heading to Sunrise Lake, which was the closest lake to the campsite, she would have made it there in a little under an hour, as it was only 1 mile away, but we'll never know for sure, as Gerald never seen Stacy again. Stacy, however, was spotted by a different group a little bit a ways from the lake, but when that group got back to the campsite, they began to ask around for a girl who fit Stacy's description, and no one had seen her. This is when the alarm bells in George's head started to ring. George gathered up everyone from nearby campers to staff members and tour guides, all to help look for his daughter. The search party lasted deep into the night but was unsuccessful. In the morning, the National Park Service conducted a proper search for Stacy. The search party included everyone, from law enforcement to other families camping out in Tuolumne. The number of searchers was speculated to be around 100 members. Yosemite was around 1,200 square miles, but searchers only searched in a 5-mile radius of the lake for a few reasons. 1, the park consisted of many natural barriers, such as steep cliffs and rivers, but mainly, they didn't believe it was possible for a 14-year-old girl to get any further in one night. It's also worth mentioning there were 3 helicopters that also assisted in the search for Stacy. But sadly, after 11 straight days of non-stop searching, the group came up empty-handed, and Stacy Ayres was never seen again. Stacy, if she is still alive, would have turned 59 years old this year. Stephen Kubacki. Stephen Kubacki was a 23-year-old student studying history at Hope College in Holland, Michigan. Stephen had many hobbies, but his favorite hobby was skiing. We know this as Stephen's family told police he often bragged about skiing some of the highest mountains in Europe. But this story doesn't take place in Europe. In fact, it all started in Stephen's home state of Michigan. In 1978, Stephen was getting ready to finish his final years of college. This was a big deal to him, as this meant he would have to say goodbye to his old life and take a step into the real world. With adulthood just over the horizon, Stephen felt like he needed one last skiing trip to escape the pressure of societal norms. And that's what he did. He packed his bag and skiing equipment up and drove 6 miles from his apartment to the coast of Lake Michigan. And just 2 days later, after Stephen didn't return home, his roommates would notify the police of his disappearance. And at first, the police did nothing, as this was 1978 and before Brandon's Law took effect. Basically, Stephen Kubacki was over the age of 18 and was allowed to be missing. Police didn't officially start looking for Stephen until someone called in his backpack and ski equipment, which had been abandoned at the bottom of the hill. Realizing this was the starting point, police followed a trail of footprints in nearby snow that walked roughly 300 feet onto the ice of Lake Michigan. Stephen's friends were quoted saying this wasn't unusual behavior for Stephen. In fact, he loved walking on top of the ice, often doing it alone for fun. Now, this probably sounds strange to those of you who aren't familiar to Midwestern tradition, but ice fishing is a relatively big sport in America. Depending on your location, ice forming on top of the lake can get as thick as 15 inches. That's enough to support the weight of a small truck. Now, Stephen's footprints led all the way to the edge of the ice and stopped at the open water. This baffled the search party, as there was no cracks leading up to this point, which rules out the possibility of him falling in. And the way his life was heading ruled out the possibility of suicide. So what happened? No one truly knows for sure, and the police came to the conclusion that Stephen simply fell into one of the deep crevices in the ice and drowned. After the search had ended, Stephen's family mourned his passing and continued on living. Although Stephen's mother had a particularly hard time believing her son had drowned, as no body was ever found. And to the family's surprise, she was right. As a full year and a half later, Stephen showed up to his aunt's house alive and well, with no memory of what happened that day. He told his father the last thing he remembered was feeling cold and dark. Then he woke up in a small meadow in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, over 40 miles away, wearing clothes that weren't even his. Stephen was told to seek help from a therapist to overcome his memory loss and get to the bottom of what happened to him during these 14 months. But he denounced the idea and never did. Instead, Stephen went and earned his PhD in psychology and doesn't like to talk about his experience. Now, I can't explain what happened to Stephen, but this particular part of Lake Michigan is called the Michigan Triangle, and locals claim that mysterious incidences happen all the time here, which have led to a few theories to arise on what actually happened to Stephen, such as alien abductions and the possibility that Stephen had stepped through a portal that formed right in front of him. I'm not saying anything like that did or did not happen to Stephen, but maybe you think otherwise, so I decided to relay this theory onto you, the viewer. Tom Messick. On November 15th of 2015, Tom Messick, who was in his mid-80s, went missing in the Adirondack Mountains, located in the northeastern part of New York, during one of his yearly hunting trips with his son. Now, what sets this mystery apart from most is that Tom was a very experienced hunter who knew his way around the area very well. But that just goes to show how unforgiving Mother Nature can be, as once the lights go out, everything looks the same in the woods. Although this was a normal father-son hunting trip, they weren't alone. In fact, they were a part of a small group of hunters who planned out the whole trip from start to finish. It's worth mentioning that in recent years, Tom wasn't doing so well, but he still decided to join the group anyways. And to make sure everything went as safely as possible, the group decided to give Tom the least strenuous task. His job was to post up next to a nearby lake as the other hunters pushed out any prey right to him. I should also say that this group didn't leave Tom in the middle of nowhere. The lake was just a few hundred yards away from a parking lot that connected to a nearby road. Furthermore, Tom also had a hunting rifle, a backpack full of supplies, and a walkie-talkie to keep in contact with the other members of the group. But even with all this, Tom managed to vanish right under the nose of experienced hunters who were well versed in the art of tracking. When the others discovered that Tom was no longer in position, they immediately spread out and began searching for him in all different directions, stopping every now and again to fire their weapons to alert others of their position. This is a common tactic used by lost hunters to help search parties locate them in times of distress. But with no such luck, Tom was officially missing, and a search party of over 300 people formed to help find him. Everybody from police officers to volunteers began scouring every inch of the woods in search for Tom. This case became so popular that at one point even the FBI got involved. Now, for those who don't know, this isn't something the FBI would normally get involved in, but something about Tom Messick's case stood out to them. Sadly, we'll never truly know, as the FBI never came out publicly with any information. All we know is that something was different with Tom's case than any other missing 411 case. Tom's wife, Beverly Messick, stated one of the FBI agents confided in her that something was off about her husband's case that was different than all the others, but he didn't go into any details beyond that. The last bit of strange information we have is that one of the hunters claimed to have heard an indescribable cracking noise coming from the direction of Tom's position. And 9 days later, another elderly man was reported missing just 50 miles away from where Tom was last seen. Some have connected these two cases, but we'll never know for sure. To this day, the Tom Messick's case remains unsolved. But what happens when a crazed fan oversteps boundaries of his favorite streamer? Click the video on screen to find out now.